Only 60 of them were ever built. One of the rarest cars on the planet, a $4 million Bugatti Chiron Pur Sport, lay crumpled in a Miami workshop, declared a total loss by the manufacturer's own technicians. Bugatti had locked the car's VIN, cut off the parts supply, and made their position clear. This car was never driving again. Most people would have walked away. Matt Armstrong booked a flight. At 32, the self-taught mechanic from Leicester was about to take on one of the most powerful automotive brands in the world, armed with nothing but a refusal to accept impossible. Matt Armstrong didn't grow up with money. He grew up in a garage. His father, Tony, was a mechanic in Leicester, England, and from the time Matt was old enough to hold a wrench, that garage was his classroom. While other kids were kicking footballs around the estate, Matt was learning how engines worked. Not from textbooks, but from getting his hands dirty on whatever rolled through the door. By 16, he'd found his first real passion, BMX. He was good enough to earn international sponsorships, competing across France, Germany, Dubai, and beyond under the Mad Gear Pro banner. But the dream had a ceiling. Sponsorships covered travel costs and not much else. So Matt was juggling everything. Restaurant shifts, automotive retail jobs, anything to keep the lights on while he chased the sport he loved. Then Germany happened. During the qualifying round of the BMX World Championships, Matt attempted a 720 tail whip and dislocated his shoulder mid-trick. He somehow qualified in 16th place through the pain, but couldn't continue. The injury never fully healed. His shoulder would dislocate randomly, even in his sleep. The career was over before he turned 21. What he did next would define everything. With BMX gone, Matt poured every hour into cars. He bought his first investment property at 21, taught himself mechanical skills in his father's workshop, and started filming his projects for YouTube. The pivot that changed it all came when his girlfriend crashed her Audi TT. Matt bought the wreck for next to nothing, rebuilt it on camera, and something clicked with the audience. That one video became a blueprint. By the time he was 32, that blueprint had built him a channel with over 6 million subscribers and a reputation for doing what everyone else said couldn't be done. Alex Gonzalez hadn't always had money. A few years earlier, he was working minimum wage shifts at a Dunkin' Donuts in Miami with no obvious path forward. He found his way out through Forex trading, spending years losing money before eventually cracking it, and by his early 20s, he'd built the kind of wealth that turns heads. His garage alone was worth millions. Lamborghinis, McLarens, 2 Bugattis. The lifestyle was very much the point, and he documented all of it for his audience online as FX Alex G. The crown jewel was the Chiron Pur Sport, one of just 60 ever made, wrapped in a custom purple finish and costing him around $70,000 a month to finance. It wasn't his first Bugatti. He'd already owned a pink Chiron, but the Pur Sport was something else entirely. A track-focused hypercar with a quad-turbo W16 engine producing 1,479 horsepower, built for people who found regular supercars too boring. He'd already pushed his luck with it once, standing on the fixed carbon fiber rear wing while making a video, cracking a component worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, but that was nothing compared to what came next. After owning the car for roughly 2 months, Gonzalez plowed the $4 million hypercar into the back of a Japanese mini truck, a vehicle worth about $4,000. The front end was destroyed, airbags deployed. A Bugatti technician flew in from Paris, inspected the damage, and declared it a total loss. The insurance paid out, the car was stripped of its title and sent to Copart. Just like that, the world was down to 59 drivable Chiron Pur Sports. Matt heard about the Chiron before the insurance had even made their final call. That window, the gap between the crash and the official write-off, was the only chance to get eyes on it before it disappeared into the auction system forever. He didn't deliberate. He booked a flight from Leicester to Miami and was in the air within days. The trip went sideways before he even reached the car. En route to the workshop, a Chevrolet cut across 4 lanes of traffic and slammed directly into a Ferrari being driven by one of Matt's crew members. Nobody was seriously hurt, but the Ferrari wasn't walking away from it. So when Matt and his team finally pulled into the workshop, 2 wrecked, expensive cars were waiting for them instead of one. Not exactly the start anyone had planned. Then he saw the Chiron. The front end had taken the full force of the impact. Airbags hung out of the dashboard. The carbon fiber nose was crumpled. the headlights destroyed, the iconic horseshoe grille twisted out of shape. Scuffs ran across the bodywork where the purple wrap had been torn away. From the outside alone, the damage was brutal, but Matt had rebuilt enough wrecked cars to know that what you couldn't see was usually worse than what you could. He started making calls to get parts prices. The headlights alone came back at $174,000 for a pair. Each front carbon fiber fender was $200,000. The bonnet, the bumper, the grille, it kept stacking up. Before he'd even looked at the structural damage underneath, the parts bill was already approaching 7 figures. And that was just the beginning. The parts prices were shocking enough on their own. But what Matt uncovered next made the money almost irrelevant. When he reached out through his contacts to start sourcing components, the response that came back stopped him cold. His supplier was clear. The figures he was quoting were based on previous Bugatti sales. If the manufacturer found out these parts were destined for this specific car, they wouldn't sell them. Bugatti had made a decision. This Chiron Pur Sport would be repaired at their facility in France, under their supervision, or it wouldn't be repaired at all. The VIN had been officially locked. Not a single authorized dealer anywhere in the world would supply parts for it. The only route Bugatti were willing to support was a factory restoration back in Molsheim, priced at around $1.7 million. For a car that had already been declared a total loss and sold at salvage auction for $1.6 million, that number wasn't a solution. It was a wall. What made it even more extraordinary was the lengths Bugatti were going to enforce it. This wasn't a legal dispute or a warranty issue. Matt wasn't the owner. He was a mechanic who'd flown across the Atlantic to help, and yet one of the most storied automotive manufacturers in the world had effectively decided that this particular chassis would never turn a wheel again unless it went through them. For most people in Matt's position, that would have been the end of the conversation. Pack up, fly home, find another project. But Matt had already started pulling the car apart. He'd seen what was underneath, and walking away had never really been part of how he operated. What happened next, nobody saw coming. Mate Rimac, CEO of Bugatti Rimac and one of the most respected figures in the hypercar world, stepped into the conversation publicly, not through a legal team or a press release, but directly on social media where the story was already generating enormous attention. Rimac wasn't there to throw his weight around. He laid out, clearly and technically, exactly why Bugatti had taken the position they had. The gearbox housing had shattered. The monocoque, the carbon fiber tub that forms the structural backbone of the entire car, had taken serious damage in the crash. Rimac pointed out that splitting a Chiron to access the transmission was a procedure only 2 facilities in the world were equipped to carry out. Shortcuts on a car this complex, traveling at the speeds a Chiron is capable of, weren't just expensive mistakes, they were potentially fatal ones. It was a reasonable argument, and to his credit, Rimac didn't just close the door. He reached out to Alex Gonzalez directly, offering to fix the car in France for $1.7 million. When Alex turned that down, Rimac came back with a reduced offer of around $600,000. Alex turned that down too. He wanted the car fixed in Miami. He wanted Matt to do it. So Matt made the call that would define the next several months of his life. With no manufacturer support, no official part supply, and no blueprint for how any of this was supposed to work, he committed to rebuilding the most complex road car ever made, from scratch in a private workshop, 5,000 miles from home. Bugatti said it couldn't be done. Matt picked up his tools. The first challenge was one Bugatti's own CEO had said almost nobody outside the manufacturer could handle. To reach the shattered gearbox, the Chiron had to be physically split in 2, front tubs separated from the rear drivetrain frame. It's not a procedure that comes with a manual. Matt and his team worked through it methodically, disconnecting battery terminals, coolant lines, fuel lines, electrical looms, and intercooler systems one by one, until the 2 halves of the car finally came apart. What they found inside was worse than anything visible from the outside. The force of the crash had driven the engine forward in its bay, crushing a coolant pipe and damaging surrounding components. The cast aluminum bracket between the engine and gearbox, the mount holding the entire drivetrain assembly together, had shattered completely. It was a part Bugatti had no intention of selling to anyone outside their own network. So Matt did what he'd always done when the obvious solution wasn't available. He found another one. The broken mount was 3D scanned, converted into a CAD model, and CNC machined into a replacement part from scratch. When the coolant overflow pipe needed fixing and no Bugatti component was coming, the team sorted it with a section of rigid brake hose. When the exhaust system needed replacing, Valvetronic stepped in and fabricated a custom unit entirely from new. Every roadblock got the same treatment, not the right way necessarily, but a way that worked. With the drivetrain repaired, the two halves of the Chiron were reunited and bolted back together using 14 titanium bolts. The cooling system was reconnected, the ECU was relinked, the fuel lines went back in. Now came the moment everything had been building toward. Every wire reconnected, every bolt torqued down, every improvised fix holding its place. And still nobody in that workshop could be certain what was about to happen. One concern sat above everything else. At some point during the chaos following the crash, the Chiron had been driven without coolant running through the system. On any car, that's a serious problem. On a quad-turbo W16 hypercar worth millions, it could mean the engine was already gone before Matt had even started. He hit the starter. The Chiron fired up for the first time since the crash, the Valvetronic exhaust giving it a deeper, throatier roar than it had ever produced from the factory. The cooling system held. The engine ran, a car that Bugatti's own technicians had declared a total loss, that the CEO himself had said posed serious safety risks to rebuild, that had sat in pieces across a Miami workshop for months, was alive again. By this point, the story had grown far beyond Matt's usual audience. The Bugatti rebuild had pulled in millions of viewers across multiple videos, sparked a public exchange between a self-taught mechanic from Leicester and one of the most powerful automotive companies on the planet, and forced Bugatti Rimac to partially lift the part's blacklist following Rimac's direct involvement. The conversation had shifted. What started as a manufacturer protecting their brand had become something nobody in the industry could ignore. As of early 2026, the rebuild is still ongoing. The Chiron isn't back on the road yet, but it's running. And that alone, given everything Bugatti said about what was and wasn't possible, is remarkable. Matt Armstrong hadn't just fixed a car. He'd proven a point. What Matt Armstrong did in that Miami workshop wasn't just a car rebuild. It was a statement. He flew across the Atlantic on short notice, took on a project the manufacturer had declared impossible, fabricated parts from scratch when the supply chain was shut off against him, and split open one of the rarest cars ever built using nothing but skill, improvisation, and the kind of stubbornness that doesn't really have a technical name. He didn't own the Chiron. He had no guarantee of payment that would justify the risk to his reputation. If something had gone wrong, if that engine had seized, if the monocoque had failed, if the gearbox had given out at speed, it would have been Matt Armstrong's name attached to it. Everything he'd spent over a decade building could have come apart in a private workshop 5,000 miles from home. He did it anyway. There's a version of Matt Armstrong's life where the shoulder holds in Germany, BMX pays its bills, and none of this ever happens. Instead, a mechanic's son from Leicester ends up in a standoff with a billion-dollar automotive brand and wins. The question worth sitting with is simple. What are you telling yourself is impossible?